Hey everybody, so I'm going to be doing a quick install and review of the Hamilton Motor Company Apple CarPlay interface. This is a 2014 Lexus IS250 that I've installed this in. So as you can see right now, I got Apple CarPlay playing. It's being played wirelessly through my iPhone. This is connected to my personal iPhone and it's playing wirelessly. No audio quality is lost on this. If you take a look, I can use the mouse to control the cursor on screen. You got full-fledged maps. I could swipe to kind of go through the different apps, and this is strictly for Apple CarPlay. Siri does work if I click the voice command button. Additionally, if I click the menu button or press and hold for 2 seconds, it does exit out and take me back to the OEM screen, which works without any issues. Putting the car in reverse works without any issues. If you want to switch back to the screen, all you have to do is press and hold the menu button. Oops, let me try that again. And it goes right back. This is an Android display, so if you do want to exit Apple CarPlay and kind of play around with some of the other settings, you can. I personally just choose to stick to Apple CarPlay. Alright, so the first step in installing this is going to be actually popping off these side panels. You could use any tool you want. I just prefer to use a flathead screwdriver. Pops right out, and you're going to do the same on the other side. So the next steps is to actually remove 3 screws. 1, 2, 3. Just take this and pop it out. There you go. That's it. So the next step is to actually take out the cup holder region. Sometimes you could use a flathead screwdriver if you want. There you go. And there are going to be a couple plugs down here that you have to undo. So now that we got this piece out, we're actually going to remove the entire plastic, this entire plastic trim as well. Just a heads up, there is one screw right down here, which you do need to undo in order to get this whole piece off. To do that, I like to take a flathead screwdriver and actually just pry up in certain regions where it's being held down. This one will take a bit of force, and it does feel awkward to do, but eventually you will get it. Additionally, make sure you put the car in neutral. Once all that is done, this piece will actually come up and slide back out. And there's going to be a bunch of plugs down here which you have to do undo as well. This is what it will look like when you have the important components out. The next step would be to actually pull the physical radio itself out. And to do that, there are 4 screws that you need to undo. It'd be 1, 2, 3, and then 4. All right, so to get the actual radio out, after you've undone all 4 screws, is you could just simply like that, and it will pop out, and you can undo all the connections from down low. What I would recommend you do is take a towel, place it underneath, place it down here so you can actually lay the radio. Just a heads up though, this is going to be a 2-man job. So I do have the new screen installed, but to take out the OEM screen, what you're going to do is that there's a little flap down here which you just need to pull up, and eventually that will come out, which will expose 2 10 ml bolts. You're going to undo those bolts, and the screen will essentially pull forward and you lift it out. All right, so once those 2 screws are out, you essentially would need to hold this flap up, and the screen will just lift forward. There you go. And pull up. It is going to be a little tight, just a heads up. And you're going to unplug everything that's plugged in the back. Go ahead. So Hamilton Motor Company actually provides you with the screen and all the wiring that needs to be used. I've already set up the screen and the wiring, but to kind of show you what I mean by that is that there are going to be a bunch of harnesses which are going to plug in back here from Hamilton Motor Company. Those harnesses that are directly plugged into the OEM unit, on the other end of them, you're going to plug in the OEM cables. So this is the cable from Hamilton Motor Company that I've fed through. This piece right here from Hamilton Motor Company will connect to the OEM cable from Lexus. Once that part is plugged in, you're actually going to plug in the other end of the cable to the actual unit that sits here. And that is the case for every single cable, including behind the radio and the screen. The harness that they give you kind of acts as the middleman between the OEM and the new device. The only cable that you actually have to plug in over here is going to be the one that would be designated for the mouse and or trackpad, just depending on which model year you have, which would be essentially right here. All these other cables are the ones that are stock OEM that you just unplugged from earlier. The remaining of the cables, actually, when you pull the radio out, you're going to be wiring everything back there, and then there's only one cable that needs to be fed from the back of the radio up here, and that is for your trackpad. The other cables will actually be routed to the back of the display, and some of the cables will stay back there. The easiest way to route the cables to the screen is to actually remove this area, and we'll do that next. So to open up the glove compartment section, one of the first things you're going to do is actually pull back on this little piece right here, and it just comes off with a little bit of force, just like that. The next step would be to actually take off this whole piece, which the same thing applies, will just be a little bit of force. There you go. Once those pieces are off, you actually you can remove the entire glove box. To do so, there are going to be 3 screws. 1, 2, 3. Once those are undone, I would recommend you undo these 2 bolts as well. Once those 2 bolts are undone, underneath the airbag, there is another plastic piece which also needs to be undone. There's a little, if you actually go to the back left section, there is like a little button that you could kind of click and pull in on, and this entire piece does drop down. And you can undo the light switch right here to do so. There actually is one more 10 ml bolt right here which needs to be removed as well. To recap, you remove 2 of these bolts and 1 more bolt right here. All right, so you could actually yank the airbag section down afterwards. Just like that. Be careful not to tug too hard because the airbag is still connected. And once that's out, I kind of just like to let it hang. All right, so now that the airbag is out, you have removed the 3 screws up here. There are 1 and 2 more that need to be undone. All right, so now the actual glove compartment as a whole will pop out. So once you have all the harnesses back here connected, I would recommend following the guide, the paper guide, which does come with the instructions. Once all those things are wired, the only wire that's going to be coming through this little hole here and to this section is going to be the wire for your mouse pad. The remaining of the cables, actually, once they're all fed in, I would recommend then feeding them through the back, and you could actually have them all pop out right over here through this little opening, and I would just kind of hand feed them in. Once all the cables are here, this is where it becomes a little difficult. What I would recommend doing is taking all the cables, putting a zip tie on the other end, feeding them through a little opening right here. That opening then actually leads to all the cables popping out on the other end. And I would recommend your other partner then grabbing the cables and pulling them all through to make your life easier. There are going to be 2 cables which you don't need to necessarily wire up to the top. Those 2 would be the USB as well as the GPS. I've actually fed those through my glove compartment and let those sit inside there. So once you've fed all your cables up through the back, what you're gonna do is you're essentially gonna take the new display, which is what I'm holding, connect all the cables to the new display, and once that's done, you're essentially done with the project. At that point, you just have to work in reverse to put everything back together and call it a day. I will say though, putting in the new display is going to require a lot of work. It also requires 2 people. Additionally, putting the screen in with all the additional cables sometimes can be a bit difficult, but it is doable. You will just have to push a little harder than what you may feel is necessary. So I'm actually going to try to do that right now with you guys. And now that I'm up to this point, I actually am going to have to ask my cameraman to put the cameraman down, and we're going to try to get this pushed in further back. The one tip that I would recommend when you guys are doing this is have one person essentially hold this up, have another person push the screen as far back as possible. Once you're done with that, have the other person push down here at the bottom of the screen to the point where the little screw holes are exposed. While one person is simultaneously pushing, the other person should take the screws and start getting them in there, because if not, you're never going to be able to get this thing closed. This is what I mean by you have to have someone push the display back from the bottom so the screw holes are exposed, and then you could actually tighten the bolts. Let's let go and see. It's a little difficult because if you don't have someone pushing it back and tightening at the same time, you risk cracking the display because the bolts will actually either scratch up the display and or crack up the display. As you can see, there's a little bit of damage from it, but my display is working fine. So the next step would essentially be to add the cover back onto the little opening here. So to actually get this back in is going to be a little difficult because of the bunch of harnesses that are sitting in the back, plus the additional cables. This one does require you to push in with quite a little bit of force. It will feel unnatural, but I promise that is the only way you're going to get this to close. All right, so once your radio is back in, your screen is on, we could sort of start assembling everything back together. I am going to take the glove box and essentially shove it back into its right place. Again, going to require a little bit of force, but you're gonna then, after that, do the 3 screws up here, as well as the 2 screws in the bottom. Box is back on. You are going to take your airbag, essentially clip it back into place, and remember, you're gonna have 3 bolts, 1, 2, and the third one is all the way down here. So next, you're just gonna take your cable, plug that bad boy back in, and you're just gonna mount this guy. Okay, next, you're just gonna take this piece and slide it right back on. Once this piece is on, you're just gonna reattach this piece. The glove box is put together. You're gonna start reassembling this piece right here. The next steps is to reattach all 4 bolts to the radio. Once your radio is bolted in, you're gonna take the center console area and actually slide it back on top. Remember, it's gonna go kind of forward and then you press down on it. Don't flash. All right. So we actually did make a mistake. I want to reiterate. This black part is actually going to plug into here. So this is the cable for me, the one that says joystick, and that is already wired in. That will be plugging in to the front end of the actual cup holder joystick device. Keep in mind that the other cable sitting right here will literally just be sitting there, not plugged into anything. All right, once your center console is in place, remember you do have to put this 1 screw back in. Once everything is plugged in there, you're gonna take your side pieces and actually push them back into place. Now remember, you're gonna take your 3 screws and screw in 1, 2, 3. And that is what it will look like when everything is put back together. I'm currently using my phone to film now, so Apple CarPlay won't work. But yeah, that's really it. Good luck, everyone.